Good morning. Can we get everybody to take their seats, please? I want to tell you how wonderful it is to see all of you out there. Thank you for being here. I think this is the biggest crowd I've been at a CAP meeting. I want to thank Jen here. She has done a fantastic job on this. You know, CAT has had some ups and downs, but I think we are now really on the way up, and we're going to the top. And I want to thank you for all your involvement. My name's Marie Flickinger, and I'm the chair for about another couple hours. And I'm a trustee at San Jacinto College. Working with this group has been fantastic. One of the neatest things about this group is there are no yes people. Nobody just lays down and say whatever. And so many have been involved. And I think that has brought us the good results that we have here that you see in the room today. And I think we really are going to do much better. We've got some colleges that aren't involved yet, but we're pulling them in. And I thank you for your help. And I think because of what you've done, we're going to be really able to make some changes for the students of Texas. And so thank you. I want you to join me in welcoming Brigadier General Rex Weaver. Rex, will you stand? Rex is a CAP board member and Central Texas College Board Chair who will now lead us in the pledges.
Please rise, place the American flag and follow me in honoring the national anthem. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please face the Texas flag and let's honor the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible. Please be seated.
Thank you, Rex. I'm glad to see all of you trustees, chancellors, and presidents who joined us here for this important day of professional development and advocacy. Today's audience is nearly double the attendance of last year's conference. Community colleges are the Texas solution. That is today's theme, and it will permeate the day's sessions. We as community college leaders know the value of our institutions in helping Texas sustain its economic success and create an educated population. Today's session will set the landscape for how community colleges continue to prepare for future challenges in higher education, advocate for our institutions, and provide a foundation for continued success. Today will feature two inaugural sessions of the Texas Trustee Training Institute of the Dr. John Roosh Governance Series. We would like to thank Dr. Roosh and his wife, Suzanne, for their generous contribution. John? We would like to thank also our hosts in San Antonio, the trustees and CEO of Alamo College. Please stand so we can recognize you. Alamo College has provided a great setting for us here in San Antonio, but in addition to that has also contributed resources, equipment, and personnel to ensure success of the Training Institute. And Dr. Leslie also gave us our slogan, which we've adopted, which is community colleges are the Texas solution. Dr. Leslie, thank you for that. With the assistance of Alamo College and Starlink, the professional development partner of Dallas Community College District, the sessions today will be recorded. Please note the audiovisual crew requests for all questions to be asked directly into the microphone, so audience members are sure to use the mics. We begin today with a presentation of the landscape of higher education in Texas from Dr. Raymond Paredes. Commissioner of the Coordinating Board. The Commissioner began his career in higher education in California. He taught at UCLA for 30 years as an English professor and served for 10 years as Vice Chancellor for Academic Development. In addition, he served as Special Assistant to the President of the University of California in outreach efforts to improve access to higher education for students from economically disadvantaged communities. Prior to joining the Coordinating Board 10 years ago, he'll be 10 years in July, he was Director of Creativity and Culture at the Rockefeller Foundation and then Vice President for the programs at the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. Please join me in welcoming the Commissioner who came here in spite of the fact that as soon as he leaves here, he has to drive back to Austin to catch a plane to go visit his granddaughter in California for her birthday. Is that correct? Birthday's tomorrow. So thank him for taking time to be with us on this special occasion.
Can you hear me okay? I'm gonna walk over here. I can't see the slides from over here. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I thank all of you for coming and taking part in this important activity. I also agree that the community colleges, two-year institutions, are the key to the future of Texas. Community colleges are the linchpin of the whole educational structure in Texas and around the country. You have a complex mission. Universities have a much simpler mission than community colleges do. You have to, because you've had a history, a tradition of having open doors for everyone that wants to pursue a higher education. You also have to work with students who have wildly different levels of preparation to do higher education. And so I congratulate the work that you do. I congratulate you for the challenge that you've undertaken. And I also want to particularly say thank you to trustees because, of course, what you do is an act of public service, and we really appreciate that. I can tell you that I'm always struck by the commitment that Texans have to helping their communities perform at higher levels and to their willingness to devote some of their time to public service. I'm going to give you an overall picture of higher education in Texas, and I'm going to, I hope, outline some of the critical challenges we have. Here's to give you an idea of where we stand. I'm going to focus on the two most critical components of our higher education strategic plan, closing the gaps. Most of you know that it was adopted in the year 2000. It has an end date of 2015. We're already working on the next strategic plan, which will begin to take effect in 2016. But you can see that we had two major goals: participation and success, access and completion. And this is how we're doing in terms of enrollments. We wanted to increase the number of students attending institutions of higher education by 630,000 students between the year 2000 and 2015. As you can see, we were making extraordinary progress, and then around 2011 we began to taper off, and most of the decline in enrollment has been in community colleges. And you can see that we were well above the trend line to reach our goal of 630,000 students by 2015, and things are tapering off. I think we'll make it. We've looked at some of the projections for enrollment in the fall, and I think we will hit our target of 630,000, but it's not a slam dunk as it seemed to be just a couple of years ago. Here you see the enrollment patterns, and you can see that there has been a slight decline in enrollments in public two-year institutions, and we want to bring that back up. Four-year institutions are beginning to, are continuing to grow. And notice that there's been a significant decline in independent and career colleges. Those are mostly the for-profits. And you can see that they, like them or not, they constitute a very significant part of our higher education landscape. 240,000 students enrolled in those institutions in the fall of 2013. There's been an enrollment decline, and that's easy to explain. The for-profits have been getting severely attacked in Congress and around the country, and they've suffered some significant enrollment decline. But nevertheless, you can see that we still have robust enrollments, and we're still continuing to grow if you look at the entire 15-year period. Here you see the enrollments among ethnic groups, and you can see that there's been a significant decline among white students. That's largely a demographic factor. The white population in Texas is aging, and it is also declining relative to other demographic changes. Obviously, the Hispanic population is growing most quickly. We've seen some good enrollment growth, but once again, some of you have heard me say this over and over again, we're not keeping up with the growth of the population. African American declined, enrollment declined, although once again, that's largely a demographic factor. The African American share of the population in Texas is declining. And then you can see that there's been some change there as well. This shows you, this targets more clearly where our biggest deficiencies are in terms of enrollment. And you can see that in terms of African American participation, we've actually done quite well. Notice that African American females participate in higher education at higher levels than any other ethnic group, subgroup. African American women participate at higher levels than white women, white men, and those are very significant numbers. Now, one significant change that's occurred in Texas over the past 3 years is that the percentage of African American males attending college has gone up. It's now at 5.8%. Our target was 5.7% in 2000. And I can tell you that 5 years ago, we didn't think we would hit the target. But African American males are going to college in dramatically increasing numbers. The problem, the real challenge for both African American women and men is completion. They're enrolling, but they're not finishing. We have a very significant challenge here. Hispanic males, way below the percentages for any other group, dramatically below. A percentage point, as you know, is a huge number when we're talking about 1 million students or more. This is, if we have to focus on any particular group, it's Hispanic males. What did I do? It's not working. Okay, and this just gives you this puts things in perspective. We're doing this is I skipped a couple apparently. Okay. If you look at these numbers, I'm actually pressing this thing and it's not moving. Well, I'm trying to go either way. I'm trying to get some movement. There we go. To put things in perspective, we've made significant progress in Texas, but it's important to put closing the gaps in perspective. We were so far behind when we launched this plan, and I can't take any credit for it because I was in California at the time, but the goal, the ambitious goal of closing the gaps was to get us to being average in terms of college going and completion rates compared to other states. And even with all the progress we've made, our goal was to enroll 5.7% of the state's population in higher education. And we've exceeded that already. We're at 6.3%. But look how far behind we are other states. Look how far behind we are California, more than one whole percentage point behind. And that's a lot of students. And there are a lot of other states like Massachusetts and Minnesota and New Jersey. They're not among the 10 largest states, but they send kids to college at much higher levels than Texas does. So notice that among the 10 largest states, we're only 8th in terms of college participation rates. If I were to pick one goal among the many in closing the gaps that I would regard as the most important, this would be it. This is completions. This is the number of completions. This means certificates and undergraduate degrees, baccalaureates and associate's degrees. And look where we are. Our goal was to have 210,000 completers in 2015 with a hope that we would continue to increase beyond the 210,000 completers. Notice that as of 2013, 2 years before the completion of closing the gaps, we've already exceeded the goal dramatically. And that's a tribute to all of you, because I know that all of you have worked hard on increasing your completion rates, and you have. And there's the evidence. There you see the picture for community colleges particularly, and you can see the dramatic increase from the year 2000 to 2013. If you put things in perspective once again, look at the larger picture. This is the so-called number that the Houston Endowment started publicizing a couple of years ago. If you take a cohort of 8th graders and you look 11 years down the road, this is a percentage of students that have completed some form of post-secondary credential. Statewide, a little bit under 20%. Hispanics, 12.1%, African Americans. And notice this number here, 9.5%. The most significant predictor of whether you do well in school or not is not whether you're black or brown or female or male, it's whether you're poor. This includes poor white kids as well. If you're in the top quintile in terms of family income in this country, you have close to a 90% chance of graduating from college in some form or another. If you're in the bottom quintile, you have about a 10% chance. And that's why people like James Heckman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist from the University of Chicago, has said that higher education, or the educational pipeline, I should say, but particularly higher education, is contributing as much to the economic and socioeconomic disparities in this country that we're all concerned about as much as any other institution in the country. Everybody's interested in funding, and you can see that these are the funding levels for general academic institutions, which means universities, and two-year institutions, community colleges. And you can see that funding has gone up in absolute dollars. There was that tick as a result of the 2011 session, but it's really gone down in terms of student FTE. You can see that for community college, it's gone down 21% since 2002, 2003. Universities has gone down about 12%. Most of you probably know that the board considered the funding recommendations for community colleges at its last board meeting, and we accepted and endorsed the recommendation of the Community College Formula Funding Advisory Committee and recommended their recommended level of increase in funding. We hope that we will come somewhere close to that. We've got a lot of challenges. Let me point out what some of those are. We're going to have to work closely with TEA, public education. House Bill 5 mandates a good deal of that cooperation and work together. We're going to have to work more closely with the Texas Workforce Commission to make sure that we do a better job of directing students to where the jobs are. I know that community colleges, two-year institutions in general, do a lot better in this regard than universities do. But we still have work to do. House Bill 5 requires that we have more cooperation in terms of developing courses. We're going to have to work more closely with K through 12 in terms of academic advising. It's pretty clear that K through 12 cannot provide the level of advising that is needed as a result of HB 5 by itself. We're going to have to get involved, both two-year and four-year institutions, more effective advising and counseling, and then we have to develop rigor in these local college prep courses. I am very concerned about these courses. I'm not sure as a teacher myself, I'm not sure how you correct 12 years or 11 years of underperformance with one or two courses. But we've been presented with that challenge by House Bill 5, and we've got to make sure those courses are rigorous. And higher education has to take the lead. I say this all the time when I speak to K through 12 groups, when I speak to superintendents and so forth. They don't much like it, but it's true. College readiness, college preparation is determined by college and university faculty in first-year courses. You can score 1,600 on the old SAT. You can have a straight 4.0 average in high school. You can be valedictorian of your class. But if you take a class at San Antonio College, you take an entry-level math course, and you make a D in that course, you're not college ready. So higher education has to take the lead in making sure that these courses are effective and do the job that they're intended to do, if it's possible. We sent copies of this, or at least links to copies of this booklet to every president in the state, to every community college, every university president. This was a document that was prepared by Complete College America. And they've identified a series of steps that institutions can take that lead to what they call game-changing levels of performance. Instead of improving 1%, 2%, 3% a year, these are practices that the Complete College America has identified as leading to dramatic change, 10, 12, 13% improvement in whatever the target is year to year. Outcomes-based funding is already in place, so we will watch closely, monitor closely what kind of impact it has. Obviously, we've also dealt with the college readiness assessment because we have the new TSI, which is the best diagnostic college prep test in the country. We get calls at the coordinating board all the time from other states saying, How did you do this? What does this thing look like? For the first time, we can diagnose exactly in which academic areas, I'm talking about English language arts and math, their students are deficient. Before, all we could do is say, student X is not ready to take college algebra. But we couldn't specify what the particular weaknesses were. We can now. So that we can customize remedial education or developmental education courses specifically for individual students. That's huge. Full-time, I know this is very difficult to do in two-year institutions, but there's a lot of data that as soon as you go from being a full-time student, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about 2 or 4-year institutions, but as soon as you go from being a full-time student to a part-time student, your chances of completing your credential decline by 50%. So to the extent that we can encourage students to take a full load, particularly the students that you get that come right out of high school, that would help enormously. Structured schedules and guided pathways, fewer choices, less confusion. And community colleges have been doing this all over the country, that you've got a lot of students who really don't know how to negotiate or navigate their way through all the choices, the course choices they can make and so forth. So they put them in guided pathways. Give them fewer choices. And that dramatically improves completion rates. Community college outcomes-based funding, I won't talk about this very much. All of you have thought about this and you know that it's coming, so I'm sure you're preparing for it. We applaud community colleges embracing this. We think it's going to work. The evidence around the country is that we've done some things that were not done earlier. For example, it's very clear that if you only set aside 2 or 3% of overall funding based on outcomes, no effect at all on institutions. We know that it's got to be in the double digits in order to make a difference. And we have started at 10%. We know it's unlikely that we got the model perfectly right the first time around, and we're prepared to modify it as we go forward. But we've got a good system in place. These were the metrics that the two-year institutions developed themselves. We think it'll work, and we're eager to get it underway. I've already talked about the TSI assessment. It's the first diagnostic tool yet to measure college readiness for Texas. It was developed very, very carefully. It was developed to conform to our Texas college and career readiness standards. I wrote an op-ed piece a couple of weeks ago for the San Antonio paper, and I said, we're wasting all this time having a debate in Texas about the Common Core standards in K through 12. And I pointed out that, number one, they've been outlawed in Texas. So that all we have to do is make sure we follow that law. But more important, we don't need to worry about the Common Core because we have our own college readiness standards that were developed primarily by college and university faculty, and I happen to believe that they're superior to the Common Core. So instead of worrying about whether Common Core is going to encroach on local control and state autonomy in Texas, let's focus on implementing our own college and career readiness standards and making sure that students can perform at those levels of rigor. If we do that, we're going to have many more students college ready, and we'll find that the TSI will be a very useful tool because, once again, it's aligned with our college and career readiness standards, will be very useful in identifying specific weaknesses of students and being able to remediate those much more quickly than we have before. These are just some data that show that we have a scale from college, near college ready to adult basic education. One of the things we're finding out is that we were fearful that we were going to have 25, 30, 40% of the students who took the TSI testing into adult basic education. And it turns out that that isn't the case after all. The vast majority of students will be properly placed in developmental education. Here's a challenge. We've got to do much better, and you can see what the numbers are. I don't have to explain them, but you can see every 100 students that are deficient in reading and writing and math, you can see what percentages actually go on and move on to college level courses, and those numbers are pretty pathetic. But help is on the way. We've got a lot of you working on these issues and showing some dramatically better results. Texas State University has been working very effectively with community colleges. They've got a new regimen for improving math readiness, this focus program, and notice that at least 70% of program participants passed entry-level math courses. That's pretty impressive. And that program is going to continue to expand, and we're going to try to make sure that every community college in Texas knows about it, and that they can embrace it if they would like. We've got I know we have some other community colleges in Texas that have their own math programs that are also working quite well. That's only one. We're just highlighting one. Lone Star College is doing something that I've been advocating for as long as I've been commissioner. One of the first things I noticed when I looked at the way we do remediation in reading and writing is to separate them into two courses. And when I would ask, I'd say, I've been an English professor for 30 years, and I know one thing about teaching English. You read a text and then you write about the text. That's the way literature courses work. You read a text, then you write about the text. And why in the world would you separate those two specific intellectual exercises? And the response I would always get is, well, they're tested separately, or that's the way we've always done it. Well, we've got some institutions in the state like Montgomery College that you can take an integrated reading writing course, and the results in the states that have done this have been dramatically improving the results in terms of, first of all, placement, and secondly, having students complete the course. You could, theoretically, you can reduce developmental ed coursework by a third just by combining reading and writing, which seems to me pedagogically and intellectually justified. And here you see some numbers. What happens when you go to full time, and we've got to return to the standard that full time is 15 hours. And I know that this is much tougher for community colleges, but to the extent that we can do it, we should. There's for universities like UT Austin or Texas A&M or Texas Tech that are traditional residential universities, they should embrace this standard immediately. Look at the difference in graduation rates for two-year institutions. Something else that I would call to your attention, this is a critical issue, and for leaderships in community college, presidents, vice presidents for instruction, trustees, a critical issue. The average number of hours that students accumulate in a community college to receive an associate's degree that typically requires 60 hours, or 64, 66, is 91. You know what the national average is? 68. That's an enormous waste of money, both on the part of the institutions and the students. 91. We are, I don't know, we're going to try to take a look at this issue, but I do not understand why Texas is so out of whack with the rest of the country on this issue. We're also out of whack with the rest of the country in terms of universities. The average number of hours that students accumulate to get a baccalaureate degree in Texas is about 146 for a 120-hour degree. The national average is about 136, 135, and we're at 147. You've all heard about the Affordable Baccalaureate Program. You'll recall that 2011, the governor issued a challenge to higher education and said, create $10,000 baccalaureate degrees. Well, we took them seriously, and we got a grant from the Lumina Foundation, 2 institutions, 1 university and 1 community college, determined to embrace this challenge. And we don't have a $10,000 degree at A&M Commerce, but we have a $10,000 baccalaureate degree at South Texas College. It involves accelerated coursework. It involves at A&M Commerce shredded textbooks where you use a Kindle or whatever and you only pay for the articles that you're going to read or the chapters you're going to read in the textbook instead of paying for the whole thing. There's competency-based instruction where you accelerate your pace. There's no research that shows that it takes everybody 15 weeks to master a particular body of knowledge. And if you can do it sooner, then complete it and move on. Fast Start, this is a great program at the technical colleges, and I know the community colleges are using the same techniques to accelerate progress towards the completion of a credential. We're excited about what's going on here in the Alamo colleges and other places. And of course, the Texas Success Center that you all established, working on some of these 3 particular initiatives. There's huge promise there, and we've already seen indications of improvement. We've got I don't know what happened. We've got a major challenge, and I wanted to just mention this briefly. As you know, Senate Bill 414 directed the coordinating board to conduct a study of the feasibility of expanding the authority of community colleges to offer baccalaureate degrees. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to see the report. It's still in draft form. I doubt that the final report will change very much. We commissioned the RAND Corporation in Santa Monica, which is considered the gold standard in high-level research. Education is one of the fields in which they do research. We actually went to Santa Monica and visited with the RAND Corporation leadership to talk about this study and why it was so important. And they said, we already know. We've gotten calls from other states. People are watching this very closely. If Texas decides to expand the authority of community colleges to offer baccalaureate degrees, that'll have a major impact all over the country. The RAND Corporation has interviewed hundreds of people. I think the study is quite good. They're not going to make any recommendations. They're going to outline what the choices are. But I think that there's certainly a compelling argument to be made that community colleges should offer baccalaureate degrees. We're going to have to figure out in what fields, under what circumstances, how do you avoid competition between universities and community colleges? As you can imagine, universities are very concerned about this issue. So we're going to have to find a way that and I don't know what the coordinating board is going to do when they consider the final report. But I expect that they're going to propose that we have some guided expansion of baccalaureate programs in community colleges, see how that works, and go on from there. But It's a very important issue. Anyway, when we went to Santa Monica, it was significant to me. I went because I wanted to make sure that they understood how important this issue was to us. And the president of the Brand Corporation and the chairman of their board of trustees met with us. So they're taking this work very seriously. Please make sure that you read the report, and that when the board considers it finally, please, if you want to make comments about it, we have opportunities for public comment at every board meeting. Please make your voices heard. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that, as I said a moment ago, that we are working on our next higher education strategic plan. We have a very distinguished committee. It's chaired by Woody Hunt, who, as you know, is a member of the Texas Business Leadership Council. He's been very active in Texas higher education, is very concerned about the workforce of the future. The co-chair of or the vice chair of the board is Larry Faulkner, the former president of the University of Texas at Austin. These are the four areas that we're focusing on that we think will be critical to the plan: workforce alignment, making sure that that students we know that 80% of students who go to college do so because they want a better job. So we have to make sure that they are prepared to go into the workforce. I think a lot of the conversation we've had, for example, I'm trying to remember how many articles I've read in the past couple of years that ask the rhetorical question, are we producing too many English majors? Which I take personally, by the way. And I don't think the question ought to be whether we're having too many English majors or philosophy majors or sociology majors. I think the question is, are we making sure that if you major in English or philosophy or sociology or anthropology, do you have marketable skills? That's the question. And in higher education, at regular intervals, we have these initiatives like writing across the curriculum. Engineers ought to be able to write coherent paragraphs. So we're going to have, everybody is going to have to take advanced writing to make sure that they graduate from college with adequate writing and communication skills. Well, there's no reason why we can't do that in terms of the humanities and the social sciences as well. We can have marketable skills across the curriculum. And we're taking a look at that as a possible initiative for the coordinating board, but we know that we've got to do a better job of preparing students, informing students, and preparing them about and for the workplace. We've got to make sure that we can demonstrate that students and their families are getting good value for the investment in their education. That means we're going to have to measure learning outcomes. And we're going to have to, as this last box shows, we're going to have to do a better job of defining what we mean by excellence. We don't have very good metrics for that right now. Anyway, that's the overview, and I don't know how much time we have, but if we have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Raise your hand, and then we'll get the mic there.
Yeah, you brought up the baccalaureate possibilities of that program. And I know a lot of the objection is coming from the four-year institutions based on competition. But it seems to me like we're looking at a goal of tremendously expanding the number of people going to college and completing a baccalaureate degree. We don't have space in our universities and colleges right now that offer four-year degrees to accommodate that goal.
Well, actually, we do. We have a lot of space in our universities. We don't have space at UT Austin, but we have space at we don't have space at UT San Antonio. but most universities can't absorb. That's not an indication of which direction I'm leaning. But no, we do have capacity. We have a lot of room in our universities.
Okay, we could handle a 50% increase.
I would be delighted to have that challenge.
Okay, thought I'd ask.
And let me say, I don't know that it's so much opposition as it is concern. The question is, how are we going to do this? I know Bruce has some ideas about this.
Commissioner Bruce Leslie, Alamo Colleges. I really appreciate your presentation. Very thorough, very broad-reaching. You said a lot of the things that we say in community colleges, marketable skills, for example, developing some greater imperative across the state on that topic would help all of us. We talk a lot about the challenges of bringing about change, and each one of our colleges has its own unique cultures, but it's always a struggle. I think one of the best things that happened in recent time was the 42-hour core, establishing, laying that out, giving us some imperatives that helped us work through some of the things we had to do locally, frankly made it easier for us. One of the elements, though, that I didn't see here, but you spoke to it in terms of numbers, the large numbers of courses students take before they graduate with the baccalaureate. The report that Coordinating Board published last year, the new metrics,
Right.
showed that at the Alamo Colleges, our typical student takes 90 hours to complete a 60-hour program. So we're working on that locally. But more and more, there is evidence that the transfer issue is one of the biggest inhibitors of students successfully completing a baccalaureate when they come from community colleges, because often they have to retake courses that they took at community college that various universities may or may not accept. We all have multitudes of MOUs with our partner universities because each one of them is different. I didn't see any specificity in your report about that topic. This came up as a legislative issue this past session from one of my legislators, Ruth Jones McClendon, and I'd appreciate it if you could talk about that for a second, and what leadership will the Coordinating Board be taking, your office be taking, to help finally cut through that. I don't want to overlook the tuning process. I think you're coming up with a different name for that, but I've been a strong advocate for that, and yet we know that a lot of our partner universities aren't really buying into that process, and to go through all 300 programs at the state level would take us 300 years to do that. So there's got to be a more expeditious way for us to create a methodology. I know you and I spoke recently about maybe doing it more regionally than statewide, but I'd appreciate your talking to that topic.
Well, I spent virtually all of I spent all of my campus career in California. As all of you know, California has the largest community college system in the country by far. Up until a couple of years ago, community colleges in California were free, and there was a state law in California. I think it's been modified somewhat, but for example, at UCLA, by state laws, somewhere between 35% and 40% of upper division students had to be transfer students. So I'm very familiar with close partnerships between universities and community colleges, and I was a little surprised when I came back to Texas that there wasn't the recognition with which I was very familiar of how significant, how important community colleges are. The problem in Texas is that because higher education has expanded so much, we have 38 universities, we have about 70 community colleges. That's an enormous amount of work. And what happens when we've talked about this with both universities and community colleges, they think it's a great idea and they start doing the work. And we saw this in the tuning exercise. They realize to align and to have strong articulation agreements, is an awful lot of work. And it's an awful lot of work on a continuing basis. You don't just do articulation agreements once and then they last forever, because particularly in the sciences, majors change all the time. Yeah, when I was a young faculty member at UCLA, there was no such field as physical chemistry. There's been such a change. You have to do those articulation agreements on an ongoing basis, and that's a lot of work, and that takes staff. So it's very difficult. I think statewide articulation agreements are virtually impossible to do, because you have tremendous variance in the characteristics of universities, and to some extent in community colleges. Community colleges have more in common with each other than universities do. Much more in common. And it's very hard to see how what works at UT Austin would work at Texas A&M International in Laredo. They're just very, very different institutions. And so they have different expectations of students. They have wildly different admission standards. And it's very hard to get them to come together on what they think transfer policy or expectation should be. We know that that students who transfer from community colleges to universities typically transfer to an institution very close by. So my attitude has been, let's try to develop articulation agreements at the local level or regional level. I think it's pretty clear that I think you have data, Bruce, that the vast majority of your students go on to UTSA, right? And I guess to an increasing degree to A&M San Antonio.
Yeah, and Texas State and
Yeah.
to Sam Houston.
Yeah.
And Texas Tech.
And you could develop articulation agreements with about 3, A&M San Antonio, UT San Antonio, and Texas State, and probably cover about 60-70% of your students.
Yeah, except that every department in the university has a different articulation.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to figure out a way to do that. I'm a supporter of trying to develop articulation agreements, but it is heavy lifting. And it took us, you're right, at the rate that we made progress on the tuning in mechanical engineering, it would take us about 100 years to do all the fields, and then by then most of the articulation agreements would be obsolete. So it's a huge challenge.
Commissioner, I know you've got a plane. I think we had one more question here.
Good morning, Commissioner, and I really appreciate your hard work. Hilario Cavazos from Laredo, Texas, Laredo Community College school board member or college board member. You know, community colleges play a very important role economically in the city of Laredo, and with the shortage of nurses, we're going to be offering a 4-year degree. And the reason why, because there's a shortage, and also, folks, the affordability, okay? The middle class, those that don't qualify for financial aid, it's very expensive. So, and I'm a social studies major. I wouldn't recommend right now, my 2 daughters, one's in speech pathology, one's going into nursing. You have to go into an area where you can find a job and needs, and we're planning. We passed a bond to build a state-of-the-art medical building to train our nurses and to be in partnership with the ISDs, also our oil and gas program. So we are answering the needs of our community, and we have a very hardworking school board, and we work very well with our college president, Dr. Juan Maldonado. But I know the universities argue, and they don't want us to do the 4-year degree, but it's affordability. We try to partner up with Tammy Yu on the cyber net security. You know who we partnered up with? Texas A&M San Antonio. 3 years at Laredo Community College, the senior year up at Texas A&M in San Antonio. Yes, we want to partner up, but sometimes the local universities don't want to. And like you said, every university is a different culture, and the same thing with a community college. Commissioner, again, I appreciate your hard work. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you. I just want to underscore again, I don't want to turn this into a rivalry or a competition or a fight. I don't think it's true that universities as a group oppose community colleges offering baccalaureate degrees. They're concerned about how we would implement it. I think, for example, when you start talking to university presidents and you say, okay, we're only going to start out in applied fields, which is what community colleges do now. We have 3 community colleges in Texas that can offer baccalaureate degrees, only 3. And they offer applied degrees, and from all the evidence, those programs are working well at South Texas College, Brazosport, and Midland College has a very small baccalaureate program. But they seem to be working well, and they seem to have held down the costs. We've got to monitor that. The quality seems to be good. When we talk to university presidents about applied fields, that they're only going to be in areas where universities perhaps cannot meet need, like nursing, then they relax. So it's not clear that universities are going, as a group, are going to oppose community colleges offering baccalaureate degrees. But it depends on how we do it. And I suggest that if we do it, that we do it in a measured, careful way, that we start off relatively small in fields like nursing. It's also important to point out that the community colleges that are offering baccalaureate degrees have discovered it's a lot more expensive to mount those programs than they had anticipated. So there are going to be a lot of community colleges interested in offering baccalaureate degrees that are going to have to probably slow down or tap down their expectations because it's going to cost a lot more than they thought. But I think that we're going to need, if this is going to work, we're going to have community colleges and universities working very carefully together, not competing against one another.
And I think
My pleasure. Waiting for me.
Well, we really appreciate your being here, and I'm sorry you have to drive back to Austin. And I would just want the group to know, with the co-board that we're working with, it's been a real pleasure working with him. We don't always agree on everything, but it's always very interesting, and it's obvious that he cares about the education of students in Texas. Thank you so much, Raymond, for being here.